Hey guys, welcome back to Wild West Woodscraft. My name's Trevor, and this is going to be part 3, the last part in the 3-part series I'm doing on knife use. And the first part was on just proper safety with a knife and how to properly use it. The next episode was on using or making a tri-stick and how you can practice your knife skills. And this one I'm going to just talk about what knives I use and what I look for when I'm picking a knife. So, to start off, there's no perfect knife. There's no one knife that does everything perfectly. The idea of having a one-tool option isn't really viable. It never has been throughout history. Um, People have always had multiple tools for different tasks. However, your knife can accomplish a lot of different things, and for a short-term survival situation, a knife could be all you need. So there's a couple things I look for in a knife, and I'm going to go through all these knives. And each one of them is a little different, but a lot of them have the same characteristics, and a lot of them are similar. Some of them are cheaper options you can get readily, some of them you can't actually buy. So, but just starting off, a good multi-tool is really very useful. This is a Leatherman Charge Plus. The blades on multi-tools usually aren't the best, however they can work, and to be honest, if you're only going to carry one knife, this might be all you need, because it has a folding saw on it, so it has other tool options, and you have a knife blade, and you can get a lot of work done with one of these. However, if you're doing any major shelter building, any stuff like that, this is going to be a little inadequate. Folding knives generally aren't the best for woodworking and I guess survival type tasks or the bushcraft stuff. However, I've processed game with this. I've done all sorts of work with just a Leatherman. So a good multi-tool is great for all sorts of stuff, plus it has a lot of other uses on it. However, I wouldn't consider that a be-all knife. It definitely has some limitations. However, something like this is, like I carry this is my EDC knife. I don't carry a fixed blade very often. Every once in a while I do, but this is what I have on me all the time. Another good option would be a Victorinox Swiss Army knife. Those are useful. I prefer the pliers on a Leatherman, but I do enjoy the knife blades on Victorinox knives. So, multi-tool is a knife, but I wouldn't consider that your primary cutting edge. That's more of a backup to me. So starting off with the fixed blades, which for survival or bushcraft, I recommend fixed blades as your primary knife. This is a neck knife that I made the sheath. It could be worn on a belt as well, but I primarily like wearing it as a neck knife because it's nice and small. In the winter time is really nice because you have all the layers around your waist, and so it can be hard to get to a fixed blade, where this you can just wear around your neck. This particular knife is made by Gabe of All Trades on Instagram. I got it from him. It's a nice little knife. In my opinion, it's probably the perfect size for a knife if you have it paired up with something like an axe or a tomahawk. Because this can do all your fine tasks, and then the chopping tool will do all the bigger tasks. But on this one, it's a Scandi grind. It has about, I would say that's about a 3 to 4 inch blade. Nice handle. It's fairly small, so like it doesn't fill my hand, and I have pretty small hands anyways, but it's a great little knife for fine work. It's just a high carbon steel. And so yeah, this is a great little knife to use as a neck knife, primarily is what I use it. It oftentimes just rides in my EDC bag because it's so small that if I needed a knife, I have it, but it's not something larger that looks weird. But again, that's just in a neck knife configuration, and the sheath I made myself. I prefer leather. It's more, I guess, traditional, and I like the pattern on leather better. I just one night was bored, and I took the tip of my knife and I scratched this design on there just to give it a little bit of character. But this is going to be a smaller knife. that works well when it's paired with another option. The next one I'll talk about is this one. This is made by Hobo Forge. It is his EDC Puko, and it's more of a flat grind. I'm not really good at with grinds, but it's not a Scandi. It's in between a flat and a saber grind, and it's a simple design. There's really nothing fancy about it, but it's a great knife. It's a beautiful knife, nice handle scales, and so this, and it can get razor sharp. But this is a nice EDC knife. If I was going to be carrying a fixed blade, it might be something like this on my belt. And the sheath it comes with is a very nicely made leather sheath. Very beautiful design, very unique. So, and what I do on my larger knives is I have through the belt loop, I usually keep either paracord or a piece of leather like this. That way I can actually carry it in scout configuration on my belt. I can run the belt through that piece of leather, and it can sit like that on my belt. That's something I was looking at some paintings of mountain men, and they would do that, is they would just have a leather thong tied around their sheath that would tie it to their belt. So I run it through the belt loop so that way it can't fall off. So even if it were to come loose from my belt, it would still hang. So, but that's another option. You'll notice on a lot of these knives I have a little lanyard. Lanyards are useful. If they're longer, you can put them over your wrist so that way you can't drop the knife. I find that kind of gets in the way, unless I was doing a lot of demonstration with the knife and I wanted to let it hang below my wrist while I was, showing stuff. But most of the time I just have a short lanyard here, and I have a bit of orange electrical tape wrapped around it, so that way it's has a little bit of high vis, so if I have it on the ground I can see it easier. The next one is another knife by Hobo Forge. This one you cannot purchase. This is a knife I won as being top team at the Gray Bearded Green Berets Master Navigator course. It's a beautiful one of, or I believe there's only 6 of them in existence at this point. Just the top teams of that course win them. But however, this design, you can get the exact knife minus the unique handle scales from the Gray Bearded Green Beret. Hobo Forge Survival still makes them, but they have more of a wood scale like this. But this is a larger knife, but it's super comfortable to use, very sharp, and it has a lot of sentimental value to it. And the sheath is similar to the other one, other than it has the red stitching to match the scales. Very nice leather sheath, heavy duty. So then, going into some of the store-bought knives, this sheath I made myself in like probably 10-15 minutes. No pattern, just cut it out, riveted it together, put a belt loop on it. Nothing fancy, but it's a good example of you can make your own gear that works. And this is going to be the Mora Carbon Garberg, and this is a great off-the-shelf knife. You can get these on sale for like 60 bucks, and the quality is amazing, incredibly sharp. It's a Scandi grind. I don't use this very often because I have other knives that mean more to me, but I have this as a demonstration that you don't have to have, a $200 knife to be able to get jobs done. It's, nothing fancy. It's not a custom knife. It's a production knife. It's not hand forged, but it does everything these knives can do. So that's a good production model that you can easily go out and get on Amazon. The next one I'll talk about, this one is by Sheck Knives. I believe that's how you pronounce it. This is the Dave Holliday edition. And I got this at Rabbit Stick last year. Dave Holliday was selling them. He did sign it, but I've used it so much the signature wore off. I don't collect knives just to have collections. It means something that I got it from him, but I'm not going to baby the thing just because his signature was on it. So this is a production model. This is this is about $100, I believe. But it has a few other features, like it has it's Scandi grind. It has a bow drill divot in the scales. These are micarta scales, and I'll go over the features I look for in a knife once I get done showing the different knives. And then the last one here is I made the sheath again. This is a historical example of in the Rocky Mountains what a lot of the mountain men carried, and this is just a butcher knife. This one is made by Sheffield, and which was a brand that produced knives back in the mid to late 1800s. It actually the 1700s is when this one, it says Sheffield was established in the 1700s. But this is I got this at a rendezvous up in Green River, and this is a great knife. It's nothing fancy, but it's a good historical example of what the mountain men would have carried, and it's a neat piece of history, and I enjoy it. Now, it's far more of a skinning knife. It's a fairly thin blade, but you can do plenty of woodscraft tasks with it. I've used this for a lot of stuff, and that's not really something you might be able to go out and buy them, but it's not like a production. I can't give you a website to go get them. And the sheath is just a simple leather sheath made how they would have made them back in the day, with just brass tacks bent over on the back and a leather thong around it. So that's the knives that I primarily use. This is actually all the knives I own. I'm not a big knife collector. There are certain things I like in a knife, and you can only use one knife really at a time, so there's no reason to have a whole bunch of them, in my opinion. However, I like getting knives from people that I, want to support, or, different things I want to try out. So what I look for in a knife, my preferred things in a knife is going to be something that's either a Scandi grind or a flat grind. Scandi grinds work better for wood carving tasks, and you can kind of see the difference. This is a flat grind, it just comes from the blade, it just comes down to a flat angle, to an edge, where this is a much steeper angle, as you can see, which would be considered a Scandi grind. And you can look those things up and get better examples online. But I am kind of up in the air. Some things I really like a flat grind, some things I like a Scandi, but generally I find a Scandi grind's better for woodworking, flat grind's better for processing game and food prep and stuff like that. So you can do both with either, so it doesn't really matter too much. Nothing, I don't really, beyond a flat and a Scandi, I don't really care for them. Another thing is I really like the Puukko design, which is more, it's a Puukko. Over other knives, like this is kind of like a Puukko, but it has a bit of a, the tip turns up, which makes it good for game processing. As you can see, something like this butcher knife is a much different design. I don't prefer this for anything but game processing. With that bigger belly, it works well for, skinning hides and stuff like that. But I prefer the Puukko design. Another thing I really like in my knives is a full tang, which means the metal goes all the way through the handle of the knife. You can see it better on examples like this. The scales are just affixed to the steel, versus if there was just a little thin piece of metal that went in and the handles were around that. This Garberg is a full tang, however the handle wraps completely around, but it does protrude out the back. And that's another thing I really like, is I do love a pommel on the back where it protrudes out. These three models here, the GB2 Hobo Forge Puukko, the Sheck knives, and then this Garberg has that exposed tang. And that works really well for pounding like fibers, like yucca leaves to make cordage, for pounding like nuts and anything that you need to pound up. It works well. Plus you can also use it if you're you know, skinning a hide, fleshing a hide. You can use it as a scraper to scrape down on that hide. So having that exposed tang, in my opinion, is really useful. Not all my knives have it, but the ones that I use most of the time do, and I really enjoy that. Another thing I like on my knives, which all of these have except for the Sheck knives, I could take a file to it, is a 90-degree spine on the back of the knife. It's not as comfortable to carve with because it's not rounded. And what I mean by 90 degree is that the back of the knife is 90 degree to the blade. So that means there are kind of, it's not sharp, but like you're not going to cut your hand on it. However, it's a kind of a rough edge as far as it's a 90-degree edge, which means you can use it for scraping. So if you're processing down fat wood to make shavings, if you're, you can strike a ferro rod with it. So that's really useful for different processing materials. That way you're not always using the knife edge and dulling it all the time. So having your knife be able to do multiple different tasks is really useful. So, as far as steel, what I like in my knife, I like a high carbon steel. None of these knives are stainless, and I don't like stainless knives. I had my first couple of knives were stainless. I had a stainless Garberg, and stainless is a lot harder to sharpen. Yes, it doesn't rust as easily, but if you just maintain these and, you know, keep them oiled, they're not going to rust. Especially if you live in the Rocky Mountains like I do, it's not humid enough for them to rust very easily. So yeah, I prefer a high carbon, and the reason for that is, one, it sharpens easier. It does get dull quicker than stainless. However, because you can sharpen it easier, I find it more useful, because both of them are going to get dull over time. However, being able to sharpen it easier in the field is the deciding factor for me. Another thing about stainless or high carbon is if you were to take some type of a quartz or flint, there's a few other rocks, or chert is another one, you can strike it on the back of the steel and it will flake little pieces of steel off, and those will ignite into a spark, and you can light charred material with that. So that's going to be your like traditional flint and steel. This is the steel, so you don't have to carry a steel striker. So in an emergency, if you had some type of charred material or a tinder fungus, that would work. You could create a fire with it. I don't really like relying on that as like an emergency thing, because you need that charred material to catch the ember, and that can be hard to source off the landscape sometimes. So just carry an emergency fire source with you. However, that is another use for your knife. Having the bow drill divot, like in this knife, is really useful. That's another, you know, option. Like this one has multiple holes in it, so you could like lash in and create a spear. That's not really something I would ever really be doing with my knife. However, it is another feature it's a cool feature. Something else to look at is like handle design. I don't like handles that have all the finger grooves. Like this is about as much as I would go as far as contour on my handle. I like something more rounded like this, because that means you can hold it in all the different grips like we talked about in the first video, and it's still comfortable. Where if you had all these finger grooves, which you see on a lot of like tactical knives, you can't, or they're weird handle shapes and stuff, like it's not comfortable to hold it in that reverse hammer grip or a side grip. Where something that's more of just a rounded handle, you can hold in multiple different angles and you're not going to get blisters or hot spots. Something else to pay attention to is if there's like a finger stop. If you're fairly new to knives, I recommend having something like that, which keeps your hand from riding up on the blade. Not that you're really ever stabbing with a knife unless you're using it as a fighting knife, which these aren't designed to do. However, I mean, they could work. Like, you know, you can make it work. But having that finger groove, or that little nub there to keep your hand from riding forward if you were to stab something, is another option. You have to decide what you want your knife to be able to do. Something like this has no finger groove. So if you were to stab something, your hand could ride up on that blade. Now, if you're holding it tight enough, I've found that it doesn't really do that, but it is a safety concern. I'm also never using my knives to stab anything. Like, that's not a use case for my knives. But it is something to pay attention to if that's something you're interested in. As far as what I recommend to people who are just getting started and have no idea where to start, you don't need to go out and buy a high-end, you know, custom knife. Just go and get something like this off of Amazon, the Mora Carbon Garberg. They're made in Sweden, so it's not some Chinese thing. They're high quality. They have all the features that I like: 90-degree spine, Scandi edge. They come razor sharp, exposed tang, full tang. The handle is kind of a polymer type material, and it does have a bit of a knot or groove there to keep your hand from riding up. And yeah, so this is a great budget option. To be honest, you know, I wouldn't even consider this budget. Like, this is the best bang for the buck. You cannot beat a $60 knife that does all this. I find this knife does everything these do just as good. So that's my recommendation for your, like, if you're just getting started and you don't know where to start, get one of these. It comes with, you can get a couple options. You can get a leather sheath that has a snap flap over the top, or you can get a just like a polymer sheath that it fits into. It's not fancy, but it works well. It's a high quality sheath. Or like I did, you can just make your own sheath out of leather, which is a great project to do. So yeah, that's the knives that I use. Really, besides, you know, just the rounded handle, no more than like 4 to 5 inches, 90-degree spine, either a flat or Scandi grind on it, full tang with the exposed tang. That's really all I look for in a knife, being high carbon steel as well. Each one of these knives does something different. Like, this is better at skinning, this is better at woodworking. This is the knife I would take if I thought I was going to lose it. I'm not going to take this knife to places where I could lose it or it could get confiscated from me, because this knife has a lot more value to me, even though, you know, you can't buy it, but because I earned it, it's a lot more valuable than this knife. So each one of these knives is used for different things. However, I can accomplish every task with each one of these. Like, the same task I can do with this, I can do with this. There's no, once your skill level gets to a certain point, you don't need, you know, a specific knife. Depending, like if I'm skinning animals, well then I'm going with this knife, versus if I'm doing wood carving, I have this knife. It doesn't matter. Throughout history, people haven't had access to tons of knives. So you can use each one of these knives for the same thing. Some of them do some tasks better than others, and depending on what your primary goal is, like the mountain men, contrary to, you know, popular belief or media, they weren't, you know, fighting with their knives all the time. They were skinning beaver. So they had skinning knives. Could they fight with these? Yes. Was there cases where they did? Yes. Could they make fires with these, build shelters? Yes. But their primary use was skinning beaver. And they had other tools that facilitated those other tasks. Where now modern woodsmen generally aren't skinning a lot of game, unless you're a big hunter. They're doing more woodworking. So they're carrying more of the puukko design that facilitates doing that woodworking better. But each one of these knives can do the same thing. They just have different limitations that you have to understand. And that just comes with time as you use your knife. Understanding what you can do with it and how to make it work. I mean, if throughout history people have used stone tools and created beautiful works of art, created entire civilizations with stone tools, surely we can learn to create what we need just using one knife, even though it might not be the best knife. You could go out with a butcher knife, a kitchen knife, and make it work. Is it ideal? By no means. However, it doesn't really matter which knife you have, it matters your skill level. So, but giving yourself a good advantage by selecting a knife that, works. Believe me, there are a lot of knives out there that don't work very well. When I was first getting started into bushcraft, um, I had lots of different knives that didn't work. So understanding which knife works best, it sets you up for success and allows you to, increase your chances of having an enjoyable time. Until you build that skill level, then you can start working with much lesser ideal knives. So these are the knife selections. I just quickly wanted to go over the features I like in a knife. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave it down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.